Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for making the early shift. I really appreciate you being with us so early in the morning. So my name's Lindsay Levin, and I'm the co-founder of TED Countdown, which is TED's global climate initiative. We work in partnership with many, many organizations to accelerate solutions to climate, and that was just a little glimpse of the kind of thing we do. I'm very excited to be here today to talk about beyond COP30 and leadership for a new era, and thrilled to have two wonderful guests with me. Corinna Gore, who is the founder of the Center for Earth Ethics, and who is also one of the leaders of the Global Ethical Stocktake. We're going to hear more about that in a moment. And Tulio Andrade, who is a long-time climate negotiator and diplomat from Brazil, and now is the Chief Strategy Officer for the COP30 presidency. So a very big thank you, Corinna and Tulio. Thrilled to have you here with us.
Thank you.
And before we go beyond COP, because we are 40-something days from COP30, I want to start with you and note this is a very tough time to be hosting a global climate conference geopolitically and in terms of our overall progress. Tell us a little bit about your vision for the COP and what you think is possible.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, and it's such a pleasure to be here this morning with you and Corinna also. I believe that what the main thing that makes me very excited is human connections, human bonds, and at the very start when Corinna and I first met, I felt this, which is a deep sense of purpose, not only recognizing where we are in terms of context, but also the extraordinary challenge that we have ahead. And this human purpose and the need for us to recover human bonds, meaning, is at the very core of the COP30 vision. Recognizing that we are in the context of climate urgency. COP30 will be the very first COP to happen when we have, after 12 months consecutive in which we are outside of this threshold of the 1.5, which is the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement. A lot will happen. Global warming is just starting. We are in the context in which we are either going to decide to change together by choice, or change will be imposed on us.
Right.
This is a reality. There is no choice but to change. And changing through agency together is at the very core of the vision of COP30. And this is not something lightly. It's about changing the entire way in which we relate to ourselves, to our planet, the way in which we understand our humanity. We have to reflect what we need to leave behind so that we can move on towards a new model of not only development but living. And this entire transformation is not only about climate adaptation and the climate transition, it's about human evolution. It's about going towards a completely new phase of humanity in which our institutions also need to evolve. So this very important purpose to change by choice together is the core of the COP30 presidency.
So one more question specifically on COP30. You've made this conscious decision to host it in Belém. We've had criticism, we've got concerns about the cost of getting there, the difficulty of getting there, and so on and so forth. Just in a couple of sentences, why Belém? Why is this so important? And what are you doing to tackle the challenges of hosting there?
Well, the COP30 presidency started with a call to the international community that we join hands together in a global mobilization against climate change. And this is what we call the Global Mutirão, which brings back from an native indigenous Brazilian tradition of communities coming together to address an urgent need by working together in a task force mode, a mode of global total mobilization. This is very important because what we want to do with COP30 is this moment in which not only do we invite the world to come to the Amazon, to understand the challenges of the Amazon, and a planetary challenge of an ecosystem that is vulnerable to a tipping point, to a climate-induced tipping point. But it's also about bringing to the core of global decision-making those communities that are the most affected, but that are at the sidelines of climate decision-making. So by incorporating, for example, this human wisdom of Global Mutirão is also about understanding that addressing the climate challenge is going to require the entirety of human collective intelligence. It's not that we give this community a space because it's ethical to do so. Way beyond that, it's because we need them.
Right.
We need their wisdom.
Right, right. I mean, as you can hear, there's something very special and I think unique in the history of COPs about the way your country and your team are thinking about this. And Corinna, that's very dear to your hearts. You're one of the world's thought leaders and practitioners in earth ethics. And that work sits at the heart of this concept of a global ethical stocktake. So what is the global ethical stocktake and why does it matter?
Well, thank you so much. I want to say first how much respect I have for you, Lindsay, and how grateful I am for this invitation and this platform. And also just to say to Tullio that it's an honor and a pleasure to be connected in this way. And I want to say that in answer to your question, the Global Ethical Stocktake is an idea that comes from the Brazilian leadership of COP30. And Tullio in particular, I want to say a word about, because I believe that he holds and communicates vision. And the Center for Earth Ethics is based at Union Theological Seminary. Occasionally we quote sacred texts and teachings from all traditions, but there is one that without vision the people perish. And I think that we have this vision which you can access through the great letters that have come from this COP presidency. I believe there have been 7. And in it is a description of the Global Ethical Stocktake and of the Mutirão and that concept. And I would say my understanding when I first heard of this and felt so excited about it and called to support it, is that it's essentially to look at this crisis through an ethical lens. So I can say more about the actual process of it. In a moment, there are official regional dialogues and there are self-organized dialogues. But essentially, it is calling in an ethical lens. And what is ethics? Well, ethics is not an exact science, but it's essentially the discernment between right and wrong and the implications for our behavior as individuals and as collectives. Ethics undergirds our societies in many ways, our laws and our social norms, but as a field of thought, it is actually most powerful in times when a deeply felt and more widely shared sense of what's right and what's wrong is out of step with both laws and social norms. And we can think about those times that has been the case in the past, right? The abolition of slavery. In this country, in the United States, I grew up right in the wake of the civil rights movement. So I really thought about that. What was that? Even though all the laws and social norms were on one side, that made more and more people say, no, this is wrong. And it is the case today with the climate crisis, with the ecological crisis. Most of what is causing ecological destruction is perfectly legal and even socially encouraged. So in order to make this change, we have to draw deeply from the wells of our faith and our wisdom traditions, from our conscience. And we need to engage other ways of coming together and thinking. And so this is what the Global Ethical Stocktake is. And in this case, it is a truly global and epic conversation that must be had not only at the COP, but afterwards in order to make the change that we need.
Now, and I know you're all very thoughtful about the journey onwards, the afterwards. Corinna, just say a little bit about how people can get involved, because there's a strong sense for many people of being disempowered, disillusioned, despairing, I would say, not only, frankly, with climate, but with many things that are going on right now. So talk a little bit about the opportunity for ordinary people to get involved.
So in the official Global Ethical Stocktake, in terms of what, there's a component to it of gathering what is said and actually presenting it at the COP. And there is still time to do that. If you would like to have a self-organized dialogue, there is a mechanism through which you can do it. You can film it, take photos, take notes, and send it in. And there will be a pavilion at COP30. There will be people who are in charge of, there are people in charge of marshalling this. My Center for Earth Ethics, my colleague Maggie Greenfield is here, and there are others we're working together to help make sure that's the case. So you can go to the Center for Earth Ethics site, to the COP30 site, and you can find out how to submit that self-organized dialogue. And then, of course, there are ways in which we can carry on and build this movement together so that there is no deadline, and it can carry on even past when that occurs.
Thank you. Now, Tulio, your work straddles both the actual practicalities of these negotiations and all the tricky stuff involved in that, and this deep sense of purpose that you and many others bring to the work. The kinds of things we're talking about here on the stage that for many people around the world do resonate. How do we bring that, or can we bring that, into spaces of power, rooms of power?
This is a great question, Lindsay, and I believe that we have been trying to do that diplomatically since we first offered Brazil to preside COP30 back in 2023. And the way that we have been doing that is really to change the way that we communicate with one another. Instead of relying on bureaucratic language that will alienate us from the challenge that we have beforehand, to use a new type of language that we really connect not only to civil servants that are involved in the negotiations, but actually remind each one of them that that they are human, and that this is the moment in which our humanity is in peril. It was a very audacious move because it's about changing a diplomatic practice, but it was highly effective because all of a sudden we were able to give back humanity to the process. And I believe that this is also part of our attempt in terms of narrative to communicate as COP30 presidency through open letters. And open letters not to member states and parties, but open letters to the entire international community. And as part of that communication is also the challenge of reminding us, the international community, where do we come from? So this year we celebrate 80 years of anniversary of the United Nations, and the very beginning of the United Nations Charter is the idea that people are united as United Nations. The process cannot be about abstraction. We need to connect the climate regime to people, because the process ultimately has to begin and end with people.
I mean, we're here talking about leadership, and as the audience can probably gather, we're talking about some different kinds of leadership than some of the ways people conventionally think about that. Corinna, you've grown up around politics, you've grown up in the US, this is your home country. We're obviously really struggling right now from a leadership point of view, certainly when it comes to things like climate change. How do you think we respond in a world where not all, but many of our political leaders are, for different reasons, failing to step up to the challenge? How do you see people responding to that?
Well, I think this is so much deeper than politics. We need to remember that that we are living at a moment in which we have in our hands decisions that will deeply affect the future of humanity and all other species. We certainly cannot allow ourselves to be derailed or dispirited by a political wind of the moment. And so I feel that where we may see and sense that those that are holding power and standing on the stage are really dissonant with the gravity of this moment, that there is leadership from the ground up, from the grassroots. There's community-based leadership. We are peoples. We carry lineages and ancestors and teachings and cultures, and all of that is actually very powerful in this moment. And I mentioned before the Center for Earth Ethics, I forgot to say there's also resources for Global Ethical Stocktake on Project Dandelion that's working very hard. There are people who are representing those who've been left out of these conversations. Dandelion focuses a lot on women's leadership. We have. It's a friend of mine said, in any room where decisions are being made about climate, there should be 3 empty chairs for those who are simultaneously the most impacted by decisions made and the least likely to have a voice, the least likely to have caused it too. And it should be for those living in the poor and marginalized people, for future generations, and the third for all non-human life. And if you think about that, or other than human life, if you think about that, it would not only be more fair to each of those 3 categories if we'd done that, it'd also be more wise. We would not have gotten into this perilous situation if, for example, we'd been looking out very specifically for the interests. And so we see in this time, in this global ethical stocktake, and in this moment when you ask about leadership and how we make sense of where we are, that in fact we need to shift our way of thinking. It's not just about the individual on the stage or at the top. This is about all of us and the whole community of life. And I think, as frustrating as it can feel, it really is an honor to be alive, as my friend Lila June says, right now, to be called to that way of being.
Right. One of the big criticisms and challenges that those of us working on climate, I think, have got to own is that whilst we've been very convincing with a certain group of society, certainly in Western countries, we haven't been relatable. We have not managed to connect with things that people deeply care about, with the urgency of everyday lives, to the extent that we need to. And there's a real need to kind of rethink that. I'm very struck that we talk about the biosphere. We recognize that everything in nature is connected, and yet somehow in climate we've managed to end up in a bit of a silo. I wonder what each of you have to say about that in terms of the lessons that we need to collectively learn if we are to engage with ordinary people around the world in ways that matter to them and resonate with them. Julio, you first.
This is wonderful. This is a great question. I think that what we really need to overcome is this disconnection between global policy making, especially in terms of climate and also nationally, with people's realities on the ground and what happens in their territories. And the main way to do that is, I believe, by instigating again in each and every one of us this deep sense of purpose, belonging, and meaning. And a way in which we can do that is also by engaging each one of us, each individual, through a sense of responsibility. Meaning that we have the ability to respond to this crisis. So the response ability, it's a crisis, what we are living, but we still have agency. We still have the power of choosing. And as part of this power of choosing, we have to remind ourselves first that we need to be prepared for the unpredictable, because things may get worse. But at the same time, we do have the power to imagine alternative versions of the future, and at the same time transform our surroundings towards this imagined future that we have together. This is also part of the essence of being human, to imagine what is still not there and transform our surroundings towards that vision. And this is recovering our agency, which is about also recovering our human essence.
Right. Wonderful. Karena, your thoughts?
Well, I think the way to engage people in this is to bring into conversation common sense that connects with experience. And I want to compliment also among the leadership of the COP in Brazil, Marina Silva, who is, of course, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. And I have heard that it was her idea to do this Global Ethical Stocktake. And it is important that we recognize that this crisis is about more than data and science and technology and statistics, as important as they are. And what the vision that came from Minister Silva was really to center not only the ethical lens, but also culture, aspects of community and belonging that really animate people's lives, that drive our perception and our behavior. And so I think it's important that we understand that that people are used to in their daily lives, understanding that you need to if you want to solve problems, if you want to live in a good way, you have to know the relationship between cause and effect in various situations, right? A lot of times in the climate conversation, it seems that if it's acknowledged at all, we become stuck at the level of effect. And that's not to say that things like adaptation are not important. This is a very important part of the climate discussion, is how do we adapt to what's already happened. But in fact, if we don't think at the level of cause, there's nothing to adapt to. There's no set moment. It will keep getting worse and worse and worse. And so what is the level of cause? We have, in the past 29 COPs, for all of the criticism about how it's fallen short, there has been an understanding of what we need to do, okay? Just recently it was named fossil fuels are the primary cause of man-made climate change. We need to keep that in mind. Also deforestation. I really appreciate the thinking of Gus Speth, who's a great environmental thinker, and he talks about the two modern megatrends of pollution and depletion. Since the Industrial Revolution in particular, that this really became this hyper thing of what human beings, as a species, what we were doing on Earth, became these two modern megatrends, filling up this thin shell of atmosphere with the pollution depleting on the ground. So deforestation is another big thing to look at. We have the pollution and we have the depletion, deforestation, depletion of soils, and so on. On the material plane, this is the level of cause. And we need to stay very clear, because in our current level of discourse, we understand people will come up with all kinds of alternative theories of what's causing this. We know with common sense, as well as with the careful observation of nature that is also known as science, or traditional ecological knowledge, which is also quite important. But that level of cause is not the only level of cause. Because one question asked in the Global Ethical Stocktake, the essential question is, if we know what we need to do as a species to stop destroying our own habitat and that of other species, why aren't we doing it? That has to do with human perception. It's not the Earth that needs fixing, right? It's us. So I think that we need to go to a deeper level of cause and see that on some level it's the illusion of separation between human beings and the rest of the natural world. We have the tools to address that. It's not just analysis. It's also embodied knowing, reminding ourselves of what we know in our bodies as well as in our hearts as well as our minds. And there's another component when we look at the deeper level of cause, and it has to do with power. And I think we do need to be very clear that in addition to the awakening of consciousness, which is a very serious matter and very much happening right now, we also need to be very clear about removing the obstacles when that happens. And there are actors, such as the industries, that are continuing to make profits who need to be removed from the positions of power that they have held. So I think once we do these things, see that way clearly, people will become engaged and realize what a beautiful opportunity this is. That it's not going to be a deprivation. It's going to be a wonderful time of change in a way that creates more flourishing.
One of the things, thank you, yeah, beautifully said. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, we're talking here, amongst other things, about the being part of all of this work, and it's often not paid proper attention to, I think partly because it is hard, actually, to put words to it and for people to fully relate to, and you've just done that, both of you, so beautifully. One of the things that's very dear to us in Countdown, actually, is that we bring together the diversity of different kinds of minds and different ideas that are needed to tackle this. And in a way, you could say part of the beauty of the challenge that we face is that we need all kinds of minds. You know, we absolutely need the engineers, you know, we need the factory floor managers who are going to figure stuff out. We need all these different skills. And actually, I think, you know, I'm often struck that we need to give more respect to these folk that are kind of figuring stuff out. Because we live in economies where we've got to build out, you know, there's many countries still who've got huge amounts of infrastructure still to be built. You know, there's all sorts of issues around people's standards of living and opportunities. Tulio, can you just comment on that mix? Because, you know, run up to COP, we need to see ourselves accelerating on the green transition, this economic transition, a new kind of industrialization, actually. We need to be excited about that and to see this as a phenomenal new era. And indeed embrace the technological opportunities that come with that, as well as being deeply thoughtful about how we do it. Just comment on how you're seeing that for COP, and actually also the fact that we're doing this in a beautiful ecological environment and country that's home to so much important nature, and, you know, the ideas of bioeconomy, for example, sit right at the heart. So just talk to us about this blend from economy through to ecology.
Absolutely. This is the moment, really, that in which we have for COP30 three main tasks. The first one is to strengthen multilateralism. And we already have a very sophisticated rule book for the Paris Agreement that was completed last year at the COP. COP29, and now is the moment in which we implement what we have agreed, which means that we have to crowd out lawyers and crowd in policymakers and engineers and solutions providers. At the same time, we have to connect the process to people. And then, thirdly, we have to accelerate the implementation of the Paris Agreement. If we are to do that, not only do we need to have climate being mainstreamed in what we do, in everything that we do, but also we have to change the financial system. It is part of our job to really align all of our resources to a future that is low carbon and climate resilient. We talk a lot about climate finance, but in addition to that, as we are in 2025, we also have to talk about data and technology as solutions. This is a moment in which we have two major transitions happening at the same time. The first one is the climate transition. That climate transition involves not only us doing the transformation into the longer term, and then a lot of opportunities there. It is irreversible, by the way, irrespective of whether countries or companies or stakeholders, they choose to be at the sidelines of this transition. This transition is irreversible, but at the same time, we also have to prepare. We also have to adapt. If we are, in addition to the climate transition, we are ongoing this major digital transition. This is the moment in which these two transitions, they need to merge into one single revolution. And at the very core of this is this idea that we need justice, we need fairness, so that prosperity is shared. One additional opportunity of bringing the COP to the Amazon is that in addition to the climate and digital transition, we have a third transformation that is just starting, which is the biotechnology transformation, the bioeconomy transformation, the way in which nature, we are learning that nature already provides for solutions that are now perhaps the continuation of the silicon era. Organic material may be what follows silicon in chips. So we are in this moment in which we need to synthesize everything so that we channel all of our resources to system transformation. At the very core is this idea that we have no time for incremental change. We need to have transformation that is systemic, structural, not only in terms of our economies and the way that we do politics, but also in terms of our mindsets and the way that we relate to one another.
Thank you so much. Now, I want to open this up. Yay, I agree. So glad you're in your role. So glad you're in your role. So I want to open this up for questions. And we're going to gather a few questions. I'm going to take my glasses off so I can see you properly. We're going to gather a few questions and then give you a chance to respond. And we've got some mics, I think. So please, don't be shy. I know it's early. Please speak up. We want to hear. Fantastic. One here, yeah, please, and then here. And I'm going to gather several before you respond. And then you pick. Off you go, yes.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the event and for hosting us. My name's Anastasia. I'm an international climate lawyer and worked in the negotiations 10 years ago when Paris was being negotiated. A lot of the vocabulary and the ideas that you've shared this morning are things that I'm completely fluent in, largely, I personally agree with. But I think Lindsay asked a really important question. And you also talked about the importance of bringing in different perspectives. And something that I'm encountering this week...
Can you hold the mic a little closer so we can just finish off the question? Yeah, hold it closer.
Yeah. The question I have has to do with diversity of perspectives. And I'm wondering where this week, if at all, you're encountering political difference and difference of worldviews and how you're navigating that.
Thank you very much. So that's political difference. Can we pass the mic to this gentleman here? Thank you. And hold it very close.
Yeah, my name is Germán Santillán from Oaxaca, Mexico. My question is super short. How you are engaging with indigenous communities in this process, and what is your personal perspective of the indigenous communities' roles and how you are engaging and making them participating in this work?
Thank you very much. If you pass the microphone to this lady here, please, and then the lady behind her. So we'll gather those 4 questions. Go for it.
Hello, hi, my name is Philippine. I work in a software company. I couldn't agree more with the idea that there is actually an awakening of consciousness in a way, I would say, that's unprecedented, and that's giving me a lot of hope. But what would be your what are you seeing in terms of the next phase, which is removing the obstacles and the people in power that are not helping the movement? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then the person behind you. Yes, thank you.
Oh, here, I can switch it up.
My name is Galina Hale. I'm a professor of economics at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And I've been struggling with the question of fairness when we talk about the climate transition, to the extent that the cumulative CO2 emissions, historically are all produced by wealthy countries. That's one reason we're wealthy, because we never paid for that. And the impacts are mostly in the global south. And so I've been always curious whether that question, is brought up at the climate talks. So as a negotiator, maybe you, Mr. Andrade, can, tell us a little bit to what extent there is awareness of that debt of the CO2 emissions that the wealthy countries have accumulated, and that the low-income countries can actually, if you allocate the carbon budget fairly, still have quite ways to go so that they can actually develop and become more wealthy.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to give you the chance to pick what you want to respond to, Corinna. We heard, the political difference question, indigenous question, the next wave of consciousness is a lot here, and then fairness. So take your pick of a couple of those.
Wow, that's a lot. Really appreciate all those questions. So thoughtful. Thank you. Okay, quickly. I would say, well, first of all, with political difference, it's interesting. I mean, it's thought a lot about what politics means, and sometimes people are afraid, oh, let's not have something political. Sometimes what that means is partisan, right? What party do you belong to? And so if that's what you mean, or sometimes it means just on different sides of a highly charged question that is a controversy. And I would say that basically that we've encountered that in this country in particular, the idea that we should bring people together across partisan lines for a long time has been a project in the climate movement. In our circles, we invite people who belong in that way to a different party or a different ideology. In many ways, it is actually a very interesting direction to go in, to talk about how conservative, small c, it is to protect the beautiful natural world that we have inherited, that we share, to go back to more traditional ways of balance in certain ways. And I think that it's healthy to look for those ways to depolarize, because indeed, this should, if anything should bring us together, it's this. Engaging indigenous peoples has been absolutely essential to the work as we see it from the Center for Earth Ethics, and it's one of the reasons it's so exciting to have the leadership from Brazil and to have this word Mutirão lifted up with indigenous meanings in it. In terms of some ways, in the official dialogue of the North America region of the Global Ethical Stocktake, we had a moderator who is Taino, who was the first people to encounter Christopher Columbus in this hemisphere. So we had also he was the facilitator, Roberto Mucro-Barrero. We had the Thanksgiving address, the very powerful traditional way of the Haudenosaunee people, better known as Iroquois, to actually begin the words before all else by acknowledging the natural world, by acknowledging, so it's very, very long normally. We had Sophia Paulus of Onondaga present a short version of the Thanksgiving address to begin that whole dialogue. And we also had perspectives indigenous from Mexico, indigenous from Greenland, which was deemed to be part of the North America region. So in that official way, we took that very seriously. We've also had engagement in talking circles of self-organized dialogues that include actually a 4-day ceremonial space with a small ceremonial sacred fire in which people shared. So this is being taken very seriously. It's not rhetorical. It's not pointed to. It is time to do it. And I feel very confident that it will also be done at COP30 in Brazil. I can answer some of the others, but I believe I'm going to turn it to Julio.
Over to you.
This is, I love the questions, and perhaps only also to build on the indigenous people's question. We are in a very special moment in Brazil in which it's a moment of humility, really, because in which we understand that our indigenous roots is what is going to protect the Brazilian society in the context of climate change. So this is no longer a moment in which we give the space to vulnerable and peoples and vulnerable populations so that they have a space that is offered by generosity. This is a moment in which we understand that we need the wisdom that the indigenous peoples can bring. Because if we are to talk about collective intelligence, so far there is a lot of human wisdom that has been outside and excluded of the toolkit of solutions. This is the moment in which there is a Brazilian indigenous thinker that says that the future will be ancestral, meaning that we have to come back to our roots. There is a lot that the indigenous peoples understand that traditional science, Western science, does not. Very pragmatically, we did a new move because we are very happy also to have at the very core of Brazilian decision-making in the government, the first minister for indigenous peoples. And we, as part of the COP30 global mobilization movement, in addition to the Global Ethical Stocktake, we also created this circle of peoples, so that, which is presided by Minister Sônia Guajajara, the Brazilian Minister for Indigenous Peoples. She's just a force of nature. It's just amazing. When we hug her, she gives us a lot of energy for the entire year. And the Circle of Peoples is about really connecting the process and COP to people, not only through the lenses of recognizing that they are victims, but most importantly, that they are at the forefront of leadership in this climate crisis.
This question of fairness, people being aware of fairness, consciousness amongst political leadership and so forth, will you just speak a little bit about that? Because, of course, the unfairness of the world is, I think, super present in this work. It doesn't mean to say that the right answers prevail, but...
Yes, no, this is a very central question, and actually fairness, equity, the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities was at the very origin of the Climate Change Convention. And now the idea that any climate transition, in order to be effective in the long term, it needs to be a just transition. It needs to include. Otherwise, we are going to have backlash.
Right.
This is not only an ethical imperative, again, this is science. That's what the IPCC tells us. So fairness is no longer, again, a moral and ethical issue. It's a scientific issue. We can model it. We have models showing that when we have inclusion, when we have climate change tackling inequalities, we are more effective and we go faster.
Right.
So it is very important, not only from the principle level, but also from the efficiency and policy-making level. What is very exciting is that Ambassador Andre, our CEO, and I, we just came back from a series of trips around the Global South. Africa, India, China, Southeast Asia, Latin America. And what we saw is that the amount of solutions, the amount of innovation coming from these communities and countries is just fantastic. It is, we have to recognize, and part of what they have been telling us, these communities in Africa, in Latin America, is again this notion of climate justice at the very core, but not to blame and shame, but actually to help us move to a new Europe and to transform. So justice, not only as a recognition, but as a platform for transformation to happen.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce that point, because one of the things that has really struck me this year, and that I think actually Countdown was able to show people, some of you may have been at our summit in Nairobi. You know, this year we've been Nairobi, and we're doing a big thing in Belém. We're going to host a TED Countdown house for 2 weeks in Belém. Any of you are going to be there or have colleagues going to be there, we absolutely want to see you. The effect of going to Nairobi for the global group that came, many Africans of course, but the global group that came together, was exactly this sense of there are so many solutions being enacted by people, often in pretty extreme circumstances, already much more impacted bluntly by the effects of climate than we are, say, in my own community. And there is this sense of people just getting on with it, which is also what's happening in Brazil. And it may well be, I mean, it is the case that countries in the global north that have been most polluting should be out in front leading, and we're bluntly struggling with that right now, as we can well see, those of you who spent any time yesterday on President Trump's speech at the UN. You know, we're pulling back, the countries, some of these countries really are. And one of the things I have a strong sense about is, let's get over that and lean in where leadership is happening. There is amazing leadership coming from different places, including from the global south. And you know, we'll see who the future belongs to. I know sort of what I'm betting on. So I think that's one of the things that's very exciting. Now we're coming to the close of our time, and I want to just give you each a moment to just share a final thought for this group. I know everybody here and beyond is really, really wishing you well. And COP is only one moment on a journey. This journey continues, and we're all part of the journey. But a closing thought, perhaps in particular in terms of what people in this room and those watching on video can do to really be engaged in this process. Your closing thought for each of us, perhaps Tulio and then Karena.
Thank you so much. I think that the main message is that COPs and the climate fight is not about an event. It is about a process. It is a process of metamorphosis, of change. It is a movement. It needs to be a movement. And because we are recognizing diversity and diversity of stakeholders, it needs to be a movement of movements so that we have action, climate action everywhere and by everybody. So, and I really hope that we can see all of you in Belém, because the amazing opportunities to really be part of this movement is what can be very exciting for the challenging times that we have ahead.
Thank you, Tulio. Karena, last word to you.
Well, thank you. I want to say that to engage people specifically in Global Ethical Stocktake, Project Dandelion Center for Earth Ethics, please go there if you would like to do that self-organized dialogue and submit it. I also want to close by addressing one of those questions that mentioned power. And I think it is very important that we follow very practical, specific proposals and suggestions to remove the obstacle, particularly the influence of the fossil fuel industry. And there are different proposals for that. There's fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. There's an idea to ban the lobbyists from the industry and so on. There are different ways, but I do strongly believe that that's important. Also, though, around power, understand, ultimately, Earth is in charge. And in the same way that we have had development come at the expense of nature, that we have a whole economic and political system that has actually not counted the real costs, has not actually taken into account that this is not, this Earth that we share, this whether Mother Earth or biosphere, however you think of it, is living, has agency. It's not a flat, dead set of resources for us to use for our economies. That is where the power lies. We will align ourselves with nature or we will lose. The United Nations was founded to prevent war. The Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, whose leadership I commend, has recently said, we are in a war against nature. One of my teachers, Larry Rasmussen, said it this way, you know, it turns out as if people on a stage are doing a play and then all of a sudden they realize the scenery is the main character. We have to shift our orientation. We align with nature, we flourish and live together. That's the vision. And I invite everybody in. I am so honored to be a part of the Global Ethical Stocktake, to the extent that my role is now partly to support that. And I thank the presidency in Brazil, and I thank Lindsay Levin for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. We wish you well, and thank you all for being here.